1927, went around to the east coast of Philadelphia Navy.
Got
I stayed over all that time in Philadelphia. September of 27 until 1929. Then they finished her up there. We made a shakedown cruise down to Trinidad. And then we went on around to the west coast and joined the fleet there.
Okay. Sorry.
Battle.
See you later. You got new tickets, right?
That's when the old Lang, you know, was the first one that had the seaplane tender.
Yeah, seaplane. They sank that, the Japs sank that in the Philippines. That December 2nd.
We come back, you know, we was the first battle wagon that got the bunks.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Across the what?
For bunks.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Down away with the sacks, you know.
Yeah.
The good sleeping.
Some old hammocks.
Boy, after I learned how to sleep in one, that was good.
Brother, they sure beat them hammocks all to hell.
Yeah, man. I didn't like them hammocks. No way, Jose.
I fell out 2-3 times, didn't have sense enough to tighten them outside clews, and the bottom ones were a little bit too tight. Lay there and they'd go like that.
Yeah, they flip so quick. Yeah, drop you right out.
Finally, I didn't know anything about them clews, so I tied a strap around me in the middle. By God, I turned over and the guy had to turn me back. Then an old salt come by and told me,
I want you guys to take a look at this and tell me what it means to you.
I got my glasses.
Come on, Stu. Is that all I can get out of you? Is
Well, it means the gee don't stand, that's for
all
sure.
right.
And I
used to
remind
buy
me
those
of
in
old
books of
Kravitz.
20. Yeah, it would remind.
Kravitz. Yeah, I remember using these a lot of times.
Bought them in books of 20.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those Kravitz there. You know, gee dump stands. I got them. 5 cents.
Now, if we talk about one on Liberty, you all can't listen.
No, we can't.
No.
Oh, will we close it? Well, I think I've heard most of those letters from him anyway.
That's them ship books, wasn't it?
I never told any of them. No, I never told her.
Oh, well, he tells me.
no, I don't recall any of that.
Didn't they have tickets, Mike, when you were in the ship service, when you were aboard there?
I don't recall that.
You don't, huh? Oh, I do. You had to have them, you didn't pay cash, you bought the book of those.
Yeah, they had them.
$5 book or two and a half book or something like that.
No, I don't recall them. I was in the boats crew, they didn't trust us with anything.
I'll remember.
You better quit chewing your gum.
Okay.
Picture.
Mike Bennett and Max Pickard, I'm going to get to you just after I talk to these two first about
fine.
the Great White Fleet.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Went to Australia. I called the Australian cruise, wasn't it? I just missed that about a year.
Okay.
Well, hell, I'd rather be a kangaroo in Australia than a millionaire in New York.
Okay, this is May 13th, Friday 13th.
This is our anniversary.
It is.
Not when I joined the ship.
Not my wedding anniversary.
How many years you been married?
Oh, wait till the beginning. I've just been married 6 years.
6 years. Okay, May 13th, 1988. My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. Max Pickard and Mike Bennett. And we're in Kansas City, and you live in Arizona, don't you, Mr.
I live
Bennett?
in Arizona.
Cochise, Arizona?
Cochise, Arizona.
And, sir, where do you live?
Cabot, Arkansas.
Cabot, Arkansas. Mr. Pickard, where were you born?
Cabot, Arkansas,
Cabot, Arkansas. And when's your birthday?
May the 15th,
What year?
1905.
1905. Sir, where were you born?
Tombstone, Arizona.
And when's your birthday?
February the 17th, 1905.
Would you tell me just why you joined the Navy over the Army or the Marines?
You want to talk to me first?
Yeah.
Well, the reason that I joined the Navy prior to the other services, I lived close to Fort Huachuca, and it was all Army there. All the soldiers were colored, and they had a bunch of second lieutenants running the Army, and there was a lot about the Army they didn't know, but they was always hollering and so forth at the men. And I lived so close to the Mexican border that there was always a lot of trouble, and living close to the border, and we had soldiers that lived right close to us. I'm talking about Hereford, Arizona, and my dad was one of the bosses of the U.S.S. Land and Cattle Company, and we had a lot of trouble over the Mexicans coming across the line and stealing cattle and horses and anything else that wasn't tied down. And the way that the Army hollered and so forth at the men, and they told them to do this, do that, and never let a man think for himself. So with my early understandings of the Army, why I knew that I would never join the Army.
Mm-hmm. Sir, why did you join the Navy?
Keep from hoeing strawberries.
That's a good reason. Tell me about boot camp. Where'd you go for boot camp, and just tell me some stories.
I went to Goat Island, San Francisco.
I went to San Diego, California.
Mm-hmm. Just describe boot camp. What went on there?
Well, boot camp was pretty good. Of course, I wished I'd have hoed the strawberries when I first got there. My mother said, now all you got to do is tell them how old you are and I'll get you out. But I wrote her first and told her, I said, Mama, just write and tell them how old I am and I'll come home. They'll put me on the beach. And she wrote back, said the strawberries are pretty grassy. Was that a lick? Then they were going to get me out. She got a lawyer there at Cabot, was going to get me out, and I was going aboard the Oklahoma, and I was the only one went in the 2nd Division. So I was roaming around that night, and I got lost, and I ended up down there. I was looking for the head, and it was the Marine quarters, you know, down there. You know where it was. So then, after I got on there, well, I liked it all right.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that I joined the Navy was being raised around the Army, and our fathers, I'm speaking about the two boys, their name was Street. Mr. Street was the general manager of the U.S.S. Land and Cattle Company, and my dad was number 2 boy. So we was around the Army. Him and I went to school at Tombstone, the Street boys did, and we decided one time we'd go out to California and make a living and get rich and come home. So the Street boys and I went out to Los Angeles. We bucked the unemployment and employment and so forth for a while, and after about a year out in California, we decided that we was going to change horses. So we come down the sidewalk one morning and run into a Navy recruiter, And right out of the clear sky, he says, how about you boys joining the Navy? And we looked at each other and says, well, I don't think you got nerve enough. So we challenged each other, and we went right over and signed our names on the dotted line and called home to verify our ages. And they said, yeah, we was old enough to join the Navy. And so by 4 o'clock that evening, we boarded the bus from Los Angeles to San Diego. And Monday morning, we woke up in the Army, the Navy. And from there on, I stayed in the Navy 4 years.
When you first saw the Oklahoma, what'd you think?
I was so glad to get out of boot camp that I would have boarded a tug if they told me that it floated on water. And I had to make a little journey from San Diego and finally boarded the Oklahoma.
Where'd you board?
Beg your pardon?
Where did you board the Oklahoma?
I boarded the Oklahoma in San Diego. No, beg your pardon, I boarded the Oklahoma in San Pedro, California. And I was so glad to get out of boot camp that I was very pleased with the Oklahoma.
Where'd you board the Oklahoma, sir?
San Francisco,
San
Rhode
Francisco.
Island.
What'd you think?
Boston was the receiving ship.
What'd you think when you first saw the Oklahoma?
I thought it was a huge vessel. I didn't know, being a country boy, it looked pretty good.
Would you two describe your quarters on the ship?
Well, I was on the next to the officers' quarters.
My quarters were next to the machine shop and also next to the boat's crew. And I immediately made friends with the boat's crew and the boys in the machine shop and immediately put in for one of those jobs.
Okay, how large were your quarters? How many men slept in that area?
I think in ours it was about, I guess from that lamp over across. I don't know what it would be, but we had 2 mess tables overhead. It must have been 40, I guess, 30 or 40, on that came there to eat. Of course, part of them was on the berth deck, but they come up to eat too, Then we would drop them tables down, at chow time, and they'd put them back up, and
Did you have hammocks or bunks?
well, I had hammocks at first, but I'd never slept in a hammock when I went aboard.
You have trouble sleeping in one?
Yeah, but I got pretty good. There's some guys told me how to do, with that, I called it a lash rope. What my job was learning how to lash them, put that old head on and bring it back. And the mattress was always too short. Then we got we was the first ship that got the bunks. We come back from, I guess it was off that cruise, I guess it was. No, we had them when we went on the cruise, didn't we?
Yes.
Bunks. We must have got them in 20, when we come back from Panama, that's when it was.
Tell me about the great cruise of 25.
Well, Australia was a wonderful place. A lot of pretty girls, candy kitchens, and I had this one patrol I had 3 candy kitchens, and this officer got to walking with me, lieutenant, and the girls, would go in there, and the bars, couldn't drink, on patrol. And then I went to a ball, our policeman's ball one night. We sat between a policeman like, everyone, there was no women allowed. I asked him why, and he said, women's what cause trouble. When we left there, I had 3 full quarts of hooch, Canadian Club, and green stripe, and I guess I had 2 Canadian clubs. Well, I didn't know how I was going to get them back up there at the room, and they fixed me up with a sack to carry me in, and I went back up the room. Then they had to dance aboard ship, and there was so many pretty girls came, so I carried, a bunch of them want to go, and I said, yeah, you can go. So I had about 7, and I come up telling these old boys aboard ship, they had to come out and meet them to see who it was, like Boss and Hoff, and an old boy lives up here in Missouri. His name was Sales, but I've forgotten his address. And he was a football player. They all took him. We danced around a while,
Where was the dance held on the ship?
Pardon?
Where was the dance held on the ship?
It was on the main deck.
Main deck.
Yeah. The skipper they had the big parade, and Pitt Scott was the skipper, and the commander was Zogbaum, wasn't it?
Mm.
First lieutenant was Lieutenant James. And
what was your rank when you went on board the ship?
I was seaman second,
What was
I was fireman 3rd class.
Okay.
Drawed $36 a month. That was quite a raise.
Now, on the Great Cruise, where did the Great Cruise begin?
It started at I guess we left out from San Pedro.
And what was the date?
It was in, I don't know, it was in 25.
25.
But I can't remember just what date it was, but we crossed the equator July the 6th.
Tell me about that.
Well, that's when see, I'd kidded these guys, old Hooks and Brooks, them all, and they got me out there, and had me up to the mast, handcuffed. Man, that's where I could just touch, and so I had to go and wheel watch. I was Lee Helton, and so I had to go and watch, and they put me through first. But I had to get out of there, and we'd build the 2nd Division working day, and we'd build this tank. They called it the Bear's Den. Had this little barber chair, and you got on there, and they smeared this graphite over your face and dumped you in the back. Oh boy, I think old Doggy Brothers was the devil, wasn't he? Old Doggy?
Yeah.
And he had this blunt pitchfork, and you had to climb out of there, and he had it charged with, man, you talk about hurt while you was wet. And then you got out of there, and you had to crawl down, I called it the cotton sack, had it full of potatoes and everything else. And you crawl through that, and them guys that didn't like you, and they would beat the stuffing out of you, and they stopped that, and they got out of there. Then when I went cleaned up, they give us half a bucket of fresh water to clean up after that, that salt water wasn't too good getting all that off. Then some of the boys went back and helped work on them, but I had to go and watch, and Lee Helton. And then we had that, when did we hit that typhoon?
I don't remember the date, but I remember the typhoon.
Tell me about the typhoon.
Go ahead.
Well, you know where it was. They closed all hatches, passed the word, all men below decks, closed all hatches, and the men they called up and come down below. And I said to old Fogey, he was a boatswain mate there, been in the Navy all his life. I said, what's wrong? And he said, he must be cracking up. And that old ship rolled and wallered and all. Then it got just as calm as day. They said we was in the eye of it. And a bunch of these destroyers, they was really going over. No, what was that transport? The Henderson or the Pyro and Nitro was long, and Medusa, and all of them, and you could see them, but it was a rough time. I thought, man, I should be back hoeing them strawberries. But then we got over there and docked in Australia, and the Seattle was carrying the flag. Admiral Kuntz was on there from Fort Smith, Arkansas. And Seattle, we docked in behind her, And then across from us was Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania was there. Well, Pennsylvania was across from Seattle.
It was our flagship.
Yeah.
And Nevada was our sister ship. I might add a little bit to that. I was very fortunate being, we went to Australia in 25, and I'd already spent 2 years in the boat's crew, and those boats were constantly rocking back and forth. So when we hit that big storm, why, the boat's crew weren't bothered like the boys that hadn't been in those small boats, and we did a lot of helping out. So many fellows got sick.
Oh yeah, they.
In fact, I relieved one of the boys that was having a little trouble through seasickness. There was, in one case, there was one of the seamen that was up in the top mast. They have a cage up there, both in the front mast and the rear mast. And he was in there, and he got so sick that they decided to let him down and put him in the hospital. So they let him down a ways, and the rope came loose that was holding him on. And every once in a while, then he would, while they was letting him down, he would swing way out over the ship. And then they'd swing back, and finally grabbed him. I helped him, hold him, and tied another rope on him, got him down. And then they took him down and put him in the sick bay, and he was really a sick boy. Then the captain wouldn't let anybody up in the mast until we got out of that big storm. We being in the boat's crew, why, we were pretty well hardened up for that storm, and our crew didn't get sick like some of the boys in other parts of the ship. I know in the machine shop, which was our headquarters more or less, why, some of those boys got terribly sick. And on the way back from Australia, why, we had perfect weather. And visiting Australia, we were at Melbourne, and that was the nicest bunch of people that I was ever associated with other than the Americans. After about 2 days, they got acquainted with us, and they would come down. We were tied up to a dock, and they would come down and visit us and just beg us to go home with them. And they were very much like our Western people. They didn't have the big hats like we do in the West, but their dress was pretty common, and other than their dialects, they were pretty much like the people of the West. They liked their drinks, and you were welcome in their homes. And there was several of our boys that went out with the girls, and I guess 3 or 4 of them got married, and there was about 10 or 15 of them that got engaged to marry. And all this happened within about the 10 days that we were in Melbourne.
Did they have trouble getting their wives back to the States?
I understand that those that brought their wives back, they had to pay their fare. And at that time, there was no airplanes flying, so they had to come back by ship.
But they weren't allowed back on the Oklahoma?
They were not, no. Nobody could come back aboard ship.
Did you drink any in Melbourne?
Oh, we those of us like to have a drink once in a while. United States was dry at that time, and we went down there and had drinks of good whiskey, and we could drink it like water compared to the old bootleg that we was drinking here in the States. But after 4 or 5 drinks, why, it got to you just like like the United States bootleg. And the people were very generous with their liquor. Everywhere you went, you were offered drinks, and everywhere you went, the Australians were very interested in the United States. And when we left down there, I talked to a official of the government down there, and he was asking how we liked Australia and everything, how we liked the people. And I told him that the people were wonderful. I was raised in Arizona, and the people were very much like our Western people. And he was some official, and he said, well, he says, you boys are down here for a very good purpose. And he inquired as how we liked it and so forth. And I noticed that when we left Australia, a day or two, and was going north to go around it to get back headed to the United States, that we maneuvered out there several days. On the way towards the United States, why, the fleet maneuvered quite a bit. And we was wondering why they wasn't heading back right away to come back to the United States, why they was maneuvering like that. And I know that when we got back to Samoa, on the way back to the States, that we were practically out of oil. And I recall the boys that were in the crew that fixed it so that the ship could draw fuel oil out of different bunkers, had quite a hard time getting enough oil to get into the Samoan Islands. And while we were there, why, we were refueled. And another point while we're in Samoan Islands, we found out that the United States had a small navy there, consisted of boats that were propelled by steam that ran from the coast out to our ship. And the navy they had there were only 1 or 2 very small battle wagons. I don't even know whether they had a gun on them or not. But it went right along with what the man in Australia said. All at once, the Oklahoma, which was almost out of oil, had anchored in real close so that we could take on a good supply of oil, and we sure did. They filled it right up. While we was there, all at once, there was several boys from that port come aboard ship wanting to get swaps. And they kept telling us how wonderful the duty was in Samoa. But every sailor that we saw with a United States uniform on all wanted to swap us to go back to the United States. And they kept telling us what wonderful duty they had there and how the girls were and what this and what's that. But they kind of overdone it, and we were a little bit suspicious. I know that we had one of our boys who was a little bit, he always was in trouble, and he swapped. And we heard from him after we got back to the United States. We had a couple of letters, and then after that we never heard from him anymore. And we got quite a kick out of those old-fashioned motorboats that were propelled with steam coming out to our ships. And a couple of real old-timers told us that, don't laugh, he says, that's the kind of a motorboat that used to take care of us years ago. And I will never forget the Samoan Islands. They were wonderful places. They had an ideal climate, and the people were wonderful. They'd come in their boats, and the gals, about all of them had on, in most cases, was some panties, and they didn't wear any brassieres, and we all got quite a kick out of that. But after watching 100 of them, the first thing you know, why, you were used to it. And they had a few swords made out of their wood, and hatchets and one thing, and they're all carved out of a real hard wood. And our crews went crazy over having that kind of something to buy to take back. We all had plenty of money at that time, because we hadn't been to ashore for a month, and we all purchased grass skirts. And everybody sent his girl home a grass skirt. And we sent Dad home a hatchet and so forth, and plenty of pictures. And we all had a picture taken of some young girl without a brassiere on and our arms around them. And we was really enjoying ourselves. The natives were exceptionally nice. But all they had to swap to us was fruit and a few grass skirts and a few hatchets. And we in turn give them money. And they were able to spend our American money there on Samoa because they had an American store there that took our American money. Can you want to add something to that?
We left Melbourne, Australia, went to Wellington, New Zealand, that was the next place we went. Wellington, New Zealand, He said we went from Melbourne we went to Wellington, New Zealand, and that's where there was a little different, more like English in Wellington, if you remember.
Did you have your first drink in Australia?
I had that night. No, I drank when I was over around Frisco and all.
Tell me what you did in Australia.
Oh, I had a time. I went on patrol, Melbourne, Australia. Well, I had a good time. I think I told you we had this street candy kitchen, a couple of candy kitchens on it, and it was Collins Street, what the name of it was, Collins Street. And then this division officer had patrol over there. He was one, and old Hooks was with me, second class. Stewart knew Hooks, he was gunner's mate. And a lot of the boys bought these diamonds, they could get blue diamonds over there, and I don't know what they paid. I didn't have enough money to buy nothing, but I did buy some silk pajamas, and so coming back to Seattle, I met a lady from somewhere up in California, I didn't have enough money to get in first class. I was coming just coach, and so she talked me out of them, and we got off this little town in had a layover stop over Pickard. And I went up to see her, you know, traded these pajamas. That's the way it was. But what the main thing, we brought the kangaroo back, you know. They called him Opie.
Kangaroo or wallaby?
Wallaby. And he was so mean, you know, he'd switch his tail, knock the table off, you know. An old boy in the 2nd Division had charge of him, you know, and he got so mean they couldn't do nothing with him. Nobody liked him, and we had this coffee, you know, they brought in for the morning watch, you know, have that coffee before we went to scrub down. And he swooped that tail around on there and knocked all the cups and everything off, and he took that coffee pot, put that hot water on him, and he went back through the 1st Division, and he ended up, I think, back on the main deck. And in the meantime, he'd run into old Senator from Oklahoma, was on board, you remember, and boy, he run into him, and they crated that thing up a while after that, you know, after he got up on the main deck, and Miss Scott was up there, and he whooped around on her, and they crated him up, and I was in the 2nd Motor Sailor when we hauled him to the beach, and he went to Oklahoma City in the zoo, and the big write-up about him out there. But then come back to the States, and a lot of the boys got leave, but I never got a leave. I got a leave and went up to Snohomish, you know, one of these. I didn't have enough money, you know, to go home. I had this allotment going to me.
So the great cruise of 25, you went from San Francisco to Hawaii?
Yeah.
Now,
And then from there to where?
Hawaii?
to Samoa.
No, we went from Hawaii to Melbourne, Australia as the next stop. Then from there we went to Wellington, New Zealand. And then we went back over there, wife and I, three years ago, I think it was. My, this changed. And I thought I might find this old pretty girl that was in the candy kitchen. And I had her name and everything, and I asked the policeman, and he said, why, she's probably a grandma by now, you know. I told Dora, I said, I'm going to look up my old girlfriend. I corresponded with her a few times. She wanted me to come back, you know, to the Australian. But this talk, Mike was telling about these drinks, you know. We were going down the street. We was walking along, and it was Sunday, and I had to go on patrol that night. He said, hello, Yonks. You know, and I said, hello, and would you like to come by the house and have a spot of tea? I said, I sure would. Well, we got in there, and he went out there, and this old hot tea, you know, I never did like hot tea at home. And I never had drank much of it, iced tea. But then I said, pardon me, I said, but in the States, we call tea a shot of homemade whiskey. Oh, I say, old bloke, would you like a... And he wheeled up that thing and pulled down a bar out of the ceiling or the wall, and there it was, every kind of drink, and they poured them out. We got drunk as Scooter Brown, right there. How about it, Mike?
That's right. You know, we were, the bars were all closed in the United States, and when we got down there and was able to have a drink of good whiskey, why, we kind of made up for some of the time we lost in the United States. Typical of young fellows in the Navy.
Well, there was many a kid never. We had one guy that didn't drink in our 2nd Division. Lee was his name, from Alabama. He did not drink.
I noticed that our skipper, I was in the boat's crew, and so the skipper was pretty wise. We had our boat in the water when it was in Australia, and the ship was tied up to the dock. So he ordered he had 2 trunks come down there, and heavy, and they put them in that boat, and then we went around the other side of the ship, and they put the crane over and picked up the 2 suitcases and put them on board. The old man took them and locked them up. We understand that they were full of good whiskey. But yet then when come a day or 2 later when we left there and some of the boys got in trouble of having too much to drink, while the old man still threw the book at them.
Do you remember the Silver Service on the Oklahoma?
Civil service.
Yeah.
Silver?
Yeah.
Yeah. They got part of it now at Oklahoma City, doesn't it?
When was that used? Do you know?
Yes. That's what was in that cage, wasn't it?
Well, it was, they got that up, but I guess that was for, I don't know, that was the officer's mess.
Or the old man's best.
Yeah. Can't remember.
No, that was details.
But it's in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, we have it there at the museum.
Yeah. And I think they've got, I'm supposed to have one of these white blouses, you know, with the stripes on it. I gave it to them and they said they had it there, and then I gave the race boat crew a picture of that, you know.
What, there in Oklahoma City?
Yeah. And I don't know where it went. That's when, the guy that, I gave it to him, but let me think of his name. What is the guy's name? Not Hotel,
Roger Fenster?
no, man, it wasn't Fencer. It was, CQ.
Night.
CQ Knight, you know. I gave him some stuff, pictures, and got a picture of the kangaroo. He said I'm going to put that in, you know, and had it dated and all. Wallaby, rather.
Yeah. And you gave these to the Historical Society?
Yeah.
Okay.
He said when they come out there, but we was down there, wife and I, and we went to the wrong place, you know, there in Honolulu. We was there 3 years ago a bit.
We were very lucky. It seems like that the older a battleship, why, the more that it was settled down, and when the old man hollered, why, there wasn't so many jumped. And the Oklahoma being one of the older battleships, why, when he started hollering and yelling and walking down one side of the ship, why the other side of the ship wasn't doing much about it. It was more or less settled down. He'd go in one compartment, and if he didn't like it, why, he'd raise the cane, and then the other compartments didn't follow. The older the ship, seems like they got to be a better home for the crew. They attended to their jobs, and they attended to all the alarms. We realized that we were sailors and we were there for the purpose of defending the country. But at the same time, the majority of the crew had been on there several years. They had shipped over from mission to mission. Consequently, it was settled down. And you would get some wild officer from some other ship that come there, and after about a year of hollering and yelling, why, he decided nobody listened to him, so he kind of settled down. We took our orders and all that, but at the same time, we had a happy ship, and it was probably one of the outstanding happy ships in the fleet. I'm being from Arizona. Why, when I first went in the Navy, I wanted to get on the Arizona. And after I was on the Oklahoma a while and went over and visited on the Arizona, I was tickled to death that I was on the Oklahoma. The Arizona continued to be a strict regulation ship. And on the Oklahoma, why, it was more of a home ship. And we looked out for each other. And when a new officer come aboard ship, it seems like the other officers kind of tamed him down a little bit, and we didn't have so much hollering and yelling at the crew. There was some, we understand there was some ships that fed better, and there's some ships that did this and that, but the big disadvantages to the Oklahoma was that when we anchored anywhere, we were the oldest ship, and we were the tail end of the crew to be anchored. Consequently, when you went ashore, in some cases it took an hour from the ship over to the dock. If you were on the California, where all the big shots and the admirals were, why, they would tie up alongside the dock. And the rest of us were out 5 or 6 miles from there. It was a very home ship. The crew was loyal to each other. Even the boys that were in one division was always friendly with another. I noticed that the going to church on Sundays when you was aboard ship, and especially when we were at sea, that they had a large attendance. And we were very fortunate in having ministers that mixed with the crew. And I noticed that on church days that he had pretty much of a full house. You might want to add to that.
Talking about church, you know, I was let out a bad word once on Sunday, you know, and he said, "You will sit on the front seat." And I had to go down there and help set up the church, you know, it was happening.
Where were services held on the ship?
We had them in, well, the service was held, they rigged it up, and it was in down by the chaplain's office. That would be on the main deck, wasn't it? Main deck. But, you know, but if you did something wrong on Sunday, they heard you swearing or something, you'd go down to the chaplain and take care of you. Ain't that right, Stuart?
Yeah, or smoking.
Yeah, smoking.
You couldn't smoke on the ship?
Yeah, well, the smoking light would be out, you know. And if they caught you smoking, boy, that was...
When did you leave the Oklahoma?
I left Oklahoma August the 4th, 1926, at Port Angeles, Washington. Went over to Seattle and hooped them up for a few days.
You went back to Arkansas?
Yeah, went back.
When did you leave the Oklahoma?
I think I left the Oklahoma pretty close to the end of the year in 27. I even forget where I got paid off.
You said you were on the East Coast. You told me.
Yeah, that's right. I was over on the East Coast.
What, you went around on what, the Charlotte or the Henderson? Charlotte?
No, I was on the Okie.
When it went around through the canal?
Yeah, I went through the canal several times. We went through there together 2 or 3 times through that canal. I know I've been through the canal 7 times, Panama Canal. And last time I worked myself, after I got paid off on the East Coast, worked myself back on a commercial liner.
Yeah. Whenever you heard the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, the Oklahoma had sunk, what was your reaction?
Well, I was Sunday evening, you know, I was working on the railroad. And I thought, well, I don't know how long. And some guy said, well, they'll wipe them off the map in 3 weeks. But you know, they had 3 ships come in there, San Pedro, and we had to take them Japanese, you know, nits on Liberty. and they pulled up, you know, and they'd meet them Japs and everything, and we had to go by all hours of the night with the ship, take them Japs ashore first, you know. They come up there, and we'd go out to fire, you know, and them Japs would go with her. But they didn't fire for a long time. Well, they claimed that was the best ships they had. All of them could speak good English, you know.
These Japanese, where were they from?
Japan.
Japan? What were they doing over here?
On these ships, you know, they were spying. I can't remember what them old ships was, but they were sorry ships they had, you know. There wasn't nothing like them new ones, and they were spying. But a lot of guys, you know, I was thinking about what they said, they're getting the dope, you know. But I never, I guess they're all right, they're human beings, but I got a little bitterness about them.
Yeah. What was your reaction when you heard the Oklahoma had sunk?
Well, naturally you have your eyes up and want to do something about it, but I was married at that time and had children, and I was running a big power plant, and I said, well, at least I can buy some bonds. So I bought some bonds, and I knew that I wasn't any kind of shape to go join the Navy again on kind of financial reasons. I was married and had too many kids.
Okay, anything else about the Oklahoma you want to talk about, discuss?
Oh, I guess we'll get Stuart.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Stuart? Coach for the CPO.
That's all right.